Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our digital class today. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the 18th century. Well, not everything you need to know. As you will have seen in the planner, you need to study page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 20, 21, 22, 23, etc. And today I'm only going to take you through page 2 to 8, and then later this week we will discuss the other pages, or later next week, probably Sunday, and otherwise it will be Tuesday. I'll let you know about that. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the beginning of the 18th century. Well, the 18th century, or what you need to know about the 18th century, does not start at 1800. It starts halfway through the 17th century with the reign of Charles I. Charles I became extremely unpopular because of a number of reasons. One of them is the taxes that he raised and that he wanted to introduce. And because he became so unpopular, he was eventually brought to trial, and he was convicted of high treason. He was executed publicly, and all of this, the fact that a monarch, a king, was put to trial and was in fact convicted and was executed, was a new phenomenon. This had not happened before. In the meantime, a civil war had started and ended, and by the end of the Civil War, the country was divided into two groups. A group that wanted a monarch to be reinstalled, the royalists, and a group that wanted the country to become a republic. Oliver Cromwell led the way, and the latter came to be. Britain became a republic known as the Commonwealth. Cromwell was not interested in culture at all, and therefore theatre was outlawed as immoral. You could say, luckily for Britain, Cromwell died in 1558, and his reign was not necessarily considered very desirable. Therefore, people felt liberated after he had died. In fact, after he died, the royalists took over, and they asked Charles II, Charles I's son, to return from France so he could be reinstalled. By the way, if you have any questions whilst watching this stream, do let me know. You don't have to interrupt me, because the only way you can ask a question is by typing it, but please do so. So if there's anything you want to know, please do type in your question and send it to me so that I can answer it as soon as possible. So Charles II was asked to return from France, and he was reinstalled, and in fact the monarchy itself was reinstalled. The period that followed is known as the Restoration. Yes, that's the first bit of it. Then, after Charles II was reinstalled, he passed a couple of interesting new laws. One of those stated that non-Anglicans, in other words, people who did not belong to the Church of England, who were either Catholics or were into any other form of religion, could not perform any public duties. So they could not teach in universities or be part of parliament or do basically any public task. Not only did Charles II cause an uproar in society in that way, the period that followed was a turbulent period because of several reasons. The bubonic plague hit England, there was the Great Fire of London, and the Dutch invaded Britain. In fact, the Dutch invasion is the last invasion of Britain, and therefore we, the Dutch, can proudly say that we were the last to invade Britain. So there was it was a turbulent era in general, but it was also religiously turbulent because Charles II's successor, James II, was a Catholic, and Charles II had been a Protestant. So that was a contradiction. That was quite a change, quite a contrast. And to make sure that the turbulence was would kind of make sure that the situation would become more stable, a marriage was arranged. Sorry, it says arranged between James II's daughter Mary and the Dutch William III. William III was a Protestant, as was the rest of the Netherlands at that time. Well, not all of them, but a large majority. And so the monarchy was known to be Protestant again. However, Mary and William would never have children together, and therefore the Stuart dynasty came to an end. This is where the Renaissance came to an end and made way for the Age of Enlightenment, that we also knew that all of Western Europe was, well, going through. During the Renaissance, personal development and the individual were key, and in the Age of the Enlightenment, reason was considered more important than emotion. So it was all about thought and intelligence and intellectual development. I'm not too sure if I told you this, but drama and theatre in Shakespeare's era was a very interesting event. Going to theatre wasn't quite what we experience today. In London, you can visit the Globe, which is the theatre that has been reconstructed after the Globe as it existed in the Shakespearean era. It was destroyed in the Great Fire of London, but they reconstructed it afterwards. And if you ever go there, you will, or if you've ever been there, you will know that you can stand. There's seats, but there's also a lot of room for people to stand, and that's what it was like in the Shakespearean era. People would stand up, the crowd would be loud, noisy, and they would cheer, they would respond to what was happening on stage. It wasn't the type of theatre that we know nowadays, where people, as soon as the lights go out, become silent. Although in England it's different than it is in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, the audience is rather well behaved. In England, I don't think I'd use those words. They're rather loud, although not as loud as they were at that time. Plays were performed during the daytime in the Shakespearean era, for the very simple reason that there was no artificial light, or very little, and therefore they were performed during the daytime and outdoors. And in the Age of Enlightenment, all that changed. In the Shakespearean era, drama and theatre was aimed at a very large, broad audience, and in the Age of the Enlightenment, it was rather aimed at the upper class. And like I said, the theatres were reinvented. They became the indoors buildings that we now know. Furthermore, women were allowed to be part of the plays. In the Shakespearean era, if there was a woman to be portrayed, then a man would do so. There was a lot of cross-dressing going on in that era, and in the Age of Enlightenment, women were allowed to play the female parts. Apart from the theatre, there were many, many, many other developments. Poetry changed from a very intellectual, rather posh concept into a more down-to-earth style and tone. satire became a very popular genre. Prose became more important, and newspapers first appeared. In fact, next lesson we will also look into the type of newspapers that were published at that time. Not only were newspapers published for the first time, novels started to appear the way that we know them nowadays. Apart from the novels, there were also some diaries that were being published, fictional diaries and non-fictional diaries. One rather important diary that you will that you will read about in Alquin magazine is Samuel Pepys' diary. Do mind the pronunciation of his name and the way it's spelled, they're rather different. Samuel Pepys was not a specifically extraordinary man. His father was a London tailor, nothing spectacular, but because his father had a proper planning for his son, Samuel Pepys did manage to go to Cambridge through a scholarship. After completing his studies, his cousin, who was into politics, helped him to get a career at the Admiralty. Unfortunately, Samuel Pepys was not known for his outstanding health, and in 1669 he could no longer write. The reason for that was that his sight started to get worse, and in fact he lost sight completely in the end. He wrote an awful lot, and his work was donated to the University of Cambridge after he died, and only posthumously his work was discovered and his diary was discovered. Do you have any questions, by the way, in the meantime? Because I'm now just rambling, and if you do have any questions, I'd really like to know. In the meantime, I'll just continue. The diary that Samuel Pepys wrote covers the period between the 1st of January 1660 through to the 31st of May 1669, which is a very interesting period, and as I already told you, a very turbulent period, because it was the part of, no, how should I put it? At this point, Charles II returned, or at the beginning of his diary, it was the point in time where Charles II was reinstalled. The plague killed, I think, 3/4 of the population of London, and the Great Fire of London destroyed large parts of the city. So he basically documented all of that through his diary. And in the end, he also started to write about more personal affairs. He started to write about his health, about his wife who died. And so it's a very interesting document in the sense that it gives us an extremely detailed insight into his life, but also into life in general at that time. It gives us a clear insight into the events that characterized this era, this part of history that is, as I said, that was very turbulent. I don't think at this point there's anything you need to know. I can start to give you an introduction to the actual 18th century, because what I've told you so far has nothing to do with the 18th century, but everything to do with the 17th century. Yes, let's do so. First of all, do you have any questions at this point? At this point, I can only tell that Stanley is watching. So Stanley, if you have any questions, let me know. As for the others, I would like to know if so far things are clear to you. Do you have any questions about the stuff that I've told you about so far? Could you let me know through the chat? That would be great. Good. Since the others remain silent, I'll just assume that things are pretty clear so far, and I'll start to tell you about the 18th century, because it's an interesting era for Britain, for England at that time. During the 17th century, the Dutch had been rather dominant internationally because of their navy and because of their territory abroad, across the globe, basically. And the 18th century gave England the possibility to overrule other countries, and they did so. Does anybody have any idea what development gave way to this new position of Britain in that era? What development can you think of could have caused this this dominant position for England? I hope the question is clear. So what development, what 18th century development gave Britain the possibility to overrule the other countries who were rather powerful at the time? Yes, Stanley says Britain's strong economical position. That's true, but that strong economical position was reinforced by something, by a development, by an invention. And my question is, what development, what invention caused the economical position to be even stronger? No, it was not the invention of faster ships, but of firearms. No, unfortunately, those aren't the correct answers. What I'm aiming at is the Industrial Revolution, because that's an opportunity that the British, that the British in general seized like no other country did. The Industrial Revolution basically gave a kickstart to the industries in London as they were known for years after this century, and it caused London to grow. The London population grew tremendously. The War of Independence. Well, the War of Independence is related. Somebody, I think I just responded with the War of Independence. That's not. That is indeed related, because it caused a change of thoughts, a change of attitude amongst people worldwide, because the war in America ended in the Declaration of Independence, and the fact that a federal convention was formed and that the people were the ones who were in control rather than the nobility, that caused an extraordinary uproar worldwide, because this was a completely new concept. Up until that point, it was completely unthinkable that the people were the ones who would decide for themselves on how the country would have to be organized. So that did do something in that day and age. Let's get back to the Industrial Revolution, because London started to produce. And they started to produce fabric, basically, amongst other things. And because of Britain's wealth, they could, because the wealth that they gained from their overseas territories, the countries that had been colonized, they were able to produce a lot, basically. And that production led to more wealth. So the economy was boosted in a way that up until that point had been unthinkable. It also caused for mobility. People started to move to the city because that's where they could find a job. That's where they could make money. People worked themselves up. People got rich. People that hadn't been rich up until that point, people who were not part of the nobility, who did not have influential, powerful ancestors. This development basically made the differences bigger, because the rich became even richer and the poor became even poorer. However, it also became the start of a new class, which is the middle class. And there was, of course, the nouveau riche, basically the new money, the people who, like I said, did not have influential, powerful ancestors, but who knew how to trade and how to make money quickly. The nobility was not pleased with this new group of wealthy people. They thought they were